Welcome, everybody, to Creators Corner here on the Tabletop Express. My name is Chris Barrows. If this is your first time joining Creators Corner, welcome. I just want to give a brief introduction to what it is. It's a place where we go and we have conversations with creators, designers, illustrators, artists about the board game industry, what they're working on, and their experiences in that industry. It's a little chance to go behind the meeple, which is always a blast. And I'm here with Keith and Matejka. Keith, let me first just say, obviously, congratulations. I think it's good to open up with a congratulations.
Sure.
Day one, I know, over, obviously, on the numbers for Lockup, Breakout, Expansion, and always great to get off to a good start, I know. So I want to make sure I say congratulations.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. Yeah, it's been a fun ride. So this is like I think I've run my 10th project or something like that. So this is it's been an interesting evolution, but it's exciting to get an expansion out for Lockup and see people get excited about it again. I mean, it's been a few years since Lockup's been out, and it's a cool, like, compact expansion. It, like, adds a lot of meat to the bone, lots of cool, interesting decisions, but without, like, having some massive box with a million pieces in it too. So it's been great, and I'm happy it's going well.
Well, one of the things that I always kick off this show with is a little bit of going back in time.
Sure.
And I've read a little bit about your background, some of the things I know you were interested in, but what was that first game or the thing that kickstarted kind of your interest in board games as a whole?
Yeah, so I mean, I enjoyed board games when I was younger, when I was a weak tyke, and so I definitely had exposure to games. The two that I always remember that my babysitter brought over were Survive and Scotland Yard, which are both still in print and both great games. And I think those I still I played a lot of when I was a kid, and I continue to play board games. But then I mainly was into video games for a long time. And then kind of what brought me back around into board games and what kind of inspired me to try to design stuff eventually at some point was there's this convergence of like three things that were happening at the same time. One, one of my best friends came over and said, "Hey, there's this website called Board Game Geek, and they've got this #1 game. It's called Puerto Rico, and he's Puerto Rican, so he's like, I want to play this game." So we went to the game store, we picked it up, and we played it all weekend long. That was kind of my introduction to modern Euro games, and it was definitely eye-opening, and definitely kind of going to a game store for the first time. You look across the store and the possibilities are endless. There's so many of these games that I'd never seen before or heard of, and going to this website called Board Game Geek, which was it's a little bit easier to navigate now, but not by much. But in trying to sort through everything that was happening there, and caught the fire in terms of passion for board games. The other two things were I moved to a new city and I wanted to meet new people. And make friends and, start building up a social circle, and board games looked like a great option to do that. So that was another motivator. And then the third one was just, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons again. Actually, we were playing Vampire the Masquerade, I think, but we were playing role-playing games with my buddies from college again. And the sessions, like, I was having fun again, but the sessions were like 8 to 12 hours long. And when I was in college, that was no big deal. But now it's like, I'm an adult and I've got, responsibilities and a job and all this stuff. So like carving out that kind of time to play RPGs just was a lot harder to do. So I was looking for RPG-like experiences that I could get done in 2-3 hours. So then I discovered Descent, and I discovered Arkham Horror. So like that was kind of getting my kind of role-playing fix through those kind of more narrative, like adventure style board games. So those three things came together, and then I was like, I was crazy board games guy. Like I wanted to play everything. I listened to all the podcasts, and I was in multiple gaming groups that were playing multiple times a week, and it was just nuts. But then at some point,
I was going to say, for you, it's important to note for you, because I think what's interesting is you had a gaming world. You have a gaming world, and you've been in kind of two gaming worlds, which is video game and board games. So you also were kind of it's not something most people can say, I think, in board games. So I also can imagine it was a unique perspective when you went from the digital to the more analog
Right,
experience.
for sure. And you'd be surprised. There's like, I worked on the publishing side over in California at Konami Digital Entertainment in publishing, and then I started working at a developer, Raven Software here in Middleton, Wisconsin, and I mean, there's definitely different types of people work at those companies, but at the developer, lots of super creative, designers and artists, 3D artists, and some 2D artists, and all this stuff. And it wasn't uncommon for like my buddies at the video game developers to have shelves of board games behind them in their offices too. Like, people who love games oftentimes, just kind of have their feet in both realms. And there's quite a few people that I know in the industry that actually worked in either still work in video games and they do board game stuff, or like now we're like used to work in video games and now I work in board games. So it's not super uncommon, but there's definitely and there's some skills that I had working in video games that I was able to transition into board games pretty easily because I come from a project management perspective. So like, I did a lot of managing of like some 3D artists that were working on Call of Duty games I was working on, but like the skills of managing artists transfers very easily over to managing 2D artists that are making illustrations for cards and stuff like that. In terms of like,
project management for me is also like the most critical. I mean, in 2021, I could say, like you got to know project management, because if you don't, you're kind of we're all have to manage something and organize our processes.
Right.
This industry in particular, I got to say, I mean, there's a lot going on in it, and you've got to have experience with project management based on the amount of games I see with your name on it these days. I mean, I give you tremendous credit for that. Obviously, you've got great people you work with, but you've got a Kickstarter out now, right? Mm-hmm. But you've got other things in the pipeline. Cape May's coming direct, from my understanding. You've got a universe that you created, which I want to get into.
Sure.
I want to talk about Cape May first, but you've got a universe that you essentially created in terms of role player.
Right.
So you're very busy. How do you make that? Before we get into Cape May, actually, let me say this: how do you manage your time? Like, what's kind of your strategy, and what are your kind of tips that you give people for just time management as a whole? Because again, you're a busy man and you're doing a lot of things and creating a lot of great games.
Thank you. I mean, time management. I mean, I make decisions quickly, and kind of it's all about prioritizing, knowing the process that you're going to go through. And like, I try to make decisions, confidently and with all the information, and I don't dwell a long time on that. Like, I guess that's one of the things. I mean, in general, I just don't sleep that much. It's not a great answer, but it's true. When I was working at Raven still, I was often like 10 to 6 or 7 as my day job, and then I spend time with my family for an hour or two, and then like 8:30 till 2 a.m. I'm doing Thunderworks stuff, and then I go to bed and I start all over again. It's like I'm it's a workaholic. It's not a good thing. Like, I mean, work-life balance is very difficult when you're trying to kind of get a company off the ground and also work a day job and all that other stuff. But for me, it's kind of like I love to work. So usually when I'm making these things, creating them, getting them out the door is fun for me. So like there's little I'd rather be doing. So
it doesn't feel like work.
Right,
then
right.
I'm imagining in your
case.
It
doesn't, right. And so and my wife tries to get me to relax all the time and like get away from the computer and like be a little bit more like turn the phone off and don't answer every single email that comes in right now, kind of stuff. And that's something that I should move in that direction. And that's but it's difficult because I like it so much. Like I'm definitely having a great time making games with Thunderworks games, and it's tough. Some of it is just work ethic, but I mean, a lot of people work really hard, and a lot of people, but some of the thing that was really helpful to me, I think, was when I was starting out, I was looking at other creators. Well, first of all, I'm playing a lot of games because I just love games, and I love having that library of knowledge of all the games that I've played. And also, I spent a lot of time kind of analyzing how things work in games and why the designer probably made this decision versus that decision. But I also I listened to a lot of people. I spent a lot of time reading blogs. When I was starting out, the two main guys were Jamie Stegmaier, and who was still doing Kickstarter at the time, and James Matthew from Minion Games. He had a lot of blog posts about like what it takes to do Kickstarters and like all the pitfalls to avoid, and like trying to learn from the mistakes of other people, because you might as well. So that kind of put me in good position so that I could prioritize properly, and I can make better decisions along the way. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of other time management specific things, but I mean, I also surround myself by great people. It's like, yes, Thunderworks is me, and now my wife has been helping out more in the last since the first of the year. But I have a great team of people that I care for very much, and they do a very good job. I've got multiple people that are doing social media stuff for me, and that's just like, they're friends of mine, and I see them doing something that they enjoy, and I say, hey, do you want to do more of that stuff, but for Thunderworks? And then they just kind of grow into that role, and I really try to, I give people enough rope. I like, this is your thing, go do it. Like, I don't want to micromanage it. Like, I want you to just handle it. And so I've been working more on that in terms of like, I used to control everything, and now I'm trying much harder to kind of cut up the pieces that either I don't want to do, or I have people who can do it better than me, and just like let them excel and let me focus on, the part that I have to do, or the part that I really enjoy. Because there's certain parts of making games that I like much more than other parts of making games. Like, so.
Well, I think what comes to mind, one, first and foremost, I think every boss, I will say, that anyone has, they want them to not be a micromanager. So that's always great, I think, for anyone to hear. The other thing that stands out to me is you talk about, obviously, just enjoying making games. One of the ones that we chatted a little bit about before we went on air, but that was one I noted I was excited about. Cape May. Cape May is a seaside city in New Jersey, right? So talk to me a little bit about Cape May, because I got to admit, a little bit greedy here. I was intrigued when I saw this title. Then I saw the visuals of it, and I said, "Okay, you really have my eye."
Right.
But what's the deal with Cape May? What are you going for with this one? And a little bit of who's with it, because I know you've got some great people, obviously, who worked on this one with you.
Yeah. So Cape May is a title that was shown to me at Origins in 2018 by the designer, whose name is Eric Mosso. He's a citizen of the East Coast of the U.S. I don't remember exactly what state he's in, but and Eric had this game, and he wanted to show it to me. And usually when I look at designs from other designers, because Thunderworks primarily does about half stuff I design and about half stuff from other designers, and Eric just contacted me and asked to show it to me. And usually I try to restrict how much stuff I'm looking at from other designers, because like it would just like bog down my day if I was spending tons of time looking at other people's stuff. So I kind of box it. I say, okay, I'll look at other people's stuff at conventions. So like I'm out of the house, I'm away from office. I can have a dedicated time to look at different people's designs. I can schedule a bunch of people to look at their stuff in sequence. So and Eric asked for me to look at this title, and I played it, and it was funny. He was like really set it up, and he brought a bunch of friends, and he was just ready to go, and his enthusiasm was really infectious. But like, and we sat down to play the game. We played like 2-3 rounds, which is usually more than enough for me to get a feel for how it works. And I just thought it was cool. It's like an economic game. It's about Cape May, New Jersey, which actually I was not familiar with. So obviously I did a lot of learning about the seaside resort of Cape May over the last few years, but and I just really liked it. And it wasn't like one thing. It wasn't like, you play Zulkin and you're like, it's the spinning wheels, or you play even like cartographers, you're making fantasy maps. It was just like, this is just a really fun space to play in. Like, it's an economic game, but you have some kind of It's a little sandboxy because you can kind of go wherever you want, and there's multiple strategies. And I was just like, it's a really solid medium weight Euro game, and I love like 90-minute medium weight Euro games, and I'm always looking for another one. And I was excited about it, so we signed it. And a lot of times people have asked me a few times, like, hey, why aren't you, this is not a fantasy game. This is weird for Thunderworks. And I mean, it is different than a lot of the stuff I do. But I published a game called Dual Powers Revolution 1917 a few years ago about the Russian Revolution, and that was not fantasy either. So as much as I love fantasy, I also want to be able to be free to publish anything that I want to publish, even if it's not fantasy. I love fantasy games, but I also like other types of games. So I'm excited to kind of bring something out that isn't fantasy to break that mold a little bit. And there'll be more non-fantasy stuff, but there's also more role-player world stuff coming too. So I was just gonna say, we developed it for a long time. I had in terms of the art, you reacted to that, and it's like,
yes,
my thought was. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to stress the if the one of the first things I saw was it might have been just preview art, not exactly, and I don't even remember where I saw it. It was probably on Twitter, and it caught my. And I'm not from New Jersey. I live in New Jersey, but I'm not from New Jersey.
Okay.
But I know of Cape May, and you catch your eye. That catches your eye because of a title. But then I think of games like Parks, which caught my attention. I bought immediately, having not looked at a single thing about gameplay. Right. This kind of fell in that, like, just a attention grabbing. You want to look at it on the table, and if this was at a convention, which I don't say this about everything, but this was at a convention, I saw it on the table. Thought would be, I want to check out that game. Right. So that's how visually striking it was for me personally.
Yeah, and I thought, like, I played the game, and we were starting to work on the development of it. A local Scott Bogan who did a bunch of development on it. He also does like some social media stuff for me, but he was like really excited about the game, and so he was excited about working on some development for it. So he kind of took it, and then it's a Euro game, and I think to myself, how do you communicate that a game is a Euro game? And the first name that comes to mind is Michael Menzel, because like he did Stone Age and Pillars of the Earth and all these kind of classic Euro games that I love, and it's like, well, we got to get that guy. So, I mean, and some of it, like, in terms of, some of it just like, this is the guy I want. I'm going to find out how to contact him and just email him. Like, there's a certain amount of gusto that, like, I have where, on my first game, it was the same way. I'd never done a board game before. I had this game about frogs, and I said, I really like the way the animals are like the that are shown in Mice and Mystics. I'm going to look up who did the artwork. And then I'm going to go to his website and send him a message. And then, then you have this dialogue back and forth. And suddenly I've got a cover that I really like from an artist who does, world-class work. And it's the same thing with Michael Menzel, or I've got another title coming up called Theme Parks with Vincent Toutre. And it's like, these guys are the best. If you're putting out something, you want the best artwork you can get. So let's find out who those people are and contact them. So, and that's basically what we did. Like, Michael Menzel was all about it. And I love the cover because it's the lighthouse, the iconic lighthouse of Cape May, but it's from a very kind of a real different angle. It's not like it's straight on like you would expect. It's got a really dynamic angle, so you can kind of see the coast and kind of the beachfront and the boardwalk, and you can see the lighthouse, and it's got a seagull, because the bird watching is a big thing in that area, and it's actually one of the mechanics of the game. So he incorporated a bunch of stuff in the game with this really creative angle, and it's striking. And I hear a lot of very positive feedback on it.
I want to note, because you started mentioning the frogs. I have to tell you, because I didn't know this at the time, because I don't always, sometimes the cover does grab your attention, you grab in the store. But my family will always buy for Mother's Day or something like that. My son picks out a board game and gets it from Bullfrogs in particular was actually the one he picked.
Oh, that's funny.
At the most recent birthday or Mother's Day. I can't remember which one it was. So we own Bullfrogs, and that's in our house. And I know you're just referencing that because JJ, I know, was one of the people who did the art on that.
Right.
And
so Bullfrogs has two different covers. The box that's horizontal is the one that I did that has a frog with an axe on the front. And then that sold out, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to reprint it. And I signed it with Renegade Games, and they reprinted it, and they redid the cover. I can't remember the woman's name who did the art, but a very famous board game artist kind of redid the cover for their edition, which is more vertical and less combat-y looking. So
it is a. I will say this about that game. That can be a challenging at times cutthroat experience when you're taking over a lily pad and jump. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend people check it out. It's a good time. So
yeah,
I've enjoyed that one quite a bit. We played that because that was a build up from another game that's out there called now I can't remember. It's slipped my mind. It's not. It'll come to me later, and it's gonna bug me. But in Flip Over Frog, it involved evolved from the simple game of Flip Over Frog, and this was our step up in the frog world, I guess.
Right. Well, there's that new one, Mystic Frogs or whatever, that came out earlier this year that I want to try out. I like frogs.
No, again, and I think it's funny. There is really a game with a theme in every kind of category. There was a post I saw today somewhere online where someone said, "What's a theme that you would, never play?" And I said, "There's no theme I would never play, because any theme can be done well." One theme that comes to mind with you, though, is this fantasy world. Right. And I was reading an article the other day, and it kind of went into the world of Role Player and how it started with just this really idea of creating the character, right? And how it grew from there. First and foremost, did you ever expect, the growth that it's had? Because you've now got kind of a wealth of options of things you can do that all came from this very basic but unique idea of creating a character, which we've all done at some point with Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, or, as I think in the article, like Skyrim, if we play video games. Yeah,
definitely. So when I had the idea for Role Player and I was starting to work on it, like, I did have this moment where I was like, this is like $1 million idea. Like, I was like, this game is a great idea. And like, I was super excited about it. We were playtesting like 3 times a day, and it was like, it was crazy. And like, I just had this insatiable desire to just push this game, polish this game as much as we can. And some of it was like, I wanted to get to Kickstarter before, because I was nervous that somebody might do something similar, because I thought it was such a great idea. And I was like, if somebody beats me to market on this is like, I'm gonna be so mad. So I thought the idea was great. And I was like, and I mentioned it to my graphic designer, who's a friend of mine, but he's done graphic design on the vast majority of the projects that I've worked on. And I told him about the idea, and he's like, I remember specifically, he's like, well, I think Bullfrogs is cooler, but this is the one that's going to make you a lot of money. I was like, obviously it's a good idea. But I didn't have this, I didn't have the idea that like I was going to create this massive world. Like, I didn't think I didn't think the Role Player universe thing was going to kind of explode the way it did. I just thought, like, this core idea is really good, and I really like this game. And then I had ideas for some expansion material down the road, which is, it's very common that when you start working on design, you think of what it could be, and then you start to kind of say, but this is the game, and then all this other stuff kind of has to either be expansion content down the road, or it just ends up on the cutting room floor or whatever. So yeah, it's evolved, and Role Player initially was, I wanted it to be kind of as generic as possible, which is a weird thing to say, but I think it comes from my video game experience, where, when you play a video game, oftentimes the hero is silent, or you don't see their face or whatever, like in a first-person shooter or something. Because the idea is that the designers want the players to kind of put themselves in that spot, to be kind of in the game. And I kind of was taking a similar approach to Role Player, where it's like, make it as generic as possible so that when people play, they can kind of create their own characters in their mind about combining these kind of different elements, and kind of and this happens every time you play Role Player. Everybody gets their classes and their backstories, and they set up their board, and there's like a minute or two where people are like creating this combination of elements as a character in their mind. And sometimes they'll like add to the backstory, or they'll like make some comments about what their character is like, which is actually my favorite part of the game. Is like, it's almost like, character creation Mad Libs, where like you just get dealt a bunch of stuff and then you try to piece it together. But as we've decided to do more fantasy games, the thought is like, we started working on Lockup, and it was like, well, this can be a whole other fantasy world, or since I already have this fantasy game, we might as well just put them in the same world, like, and have them lean up against each other. And kind of at the same time that was happening, Role Player had its expansion and people wanted monsters. So then I had to come up with like narrative reasons why there would be monsters. And then, and whenever I play demo Role Player or get or read reviews, it's very common to get the comment of like, this game's really great, but I want to do something with my character. So kind of that's where the first expansion of Role Player came from, is like, here's kind of my half answer of like, well, you can fight some monsters. At least you're doing something with them. And then the full answer is like, you want to go on adventures. But I didn't want to kind of build a whole tabletop RPG system, because that's like not really my thing as much. Like, because as much as I played RPGs, but board games are my true love. And I just saw people really getting into narrative board games, whether it be Near and Far and Above and Below or whatever, or Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, and these were getting Pirate Exit and the Unlock series and all these kind of things that were kind of adding more narrative and looking for more of a story. And it's like, well, if I were to do a game like that, it would be like one of those games where there's, but to do that, it's going to be big. It's going to have lots of branching narrative that requires a lot of writing. And at the end of the day, I'm not a writer. So it kind of just went on the shelf. Like, yeah, I would like to do that someday, but I didn't really have a path for it. And a friend of mine just like, hey, I got this idea. You should like send your Role Player characters on adventures. I was like, yeah, I've never heard that before, But he's like, but I want to do it with you. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm a writer. Like I teach writing at the university, and he was really excited about working on it. And I said, well, sure, let's try it, and I remember having that conversation, like, this is going to take us a long time to do. Like, are you on board to work on this game for like, 2-3 years? And he said, yes. And like, and now, 4 years later, Role Player Adventures is about to go on the boats back from the manufacturer and get back to land in all the backers' hands. So like, it's been like a super long road to bring that to reality, and I'm pretty excited about it.
But you just talked about, you said 4 years, and a few people have said this on Creators Corner, but it's important to like stress this. Board games don't just like get created like in a vacuum over like a few days. It's a process.
Right.
It takes time. It takes testing. So for you, how has that process, if at all, changed, or if it hasn't, kind of what has been your process in going through that and kind of crafting a timeline? Because these come in all different shapes and sizes, but you've got to build out realistically what the timeline is, especially because you're dealing with Kickstarter and people have expectations, and their expectations not always realistic. Let's be realistic about that one.
I like to go to Kickstarter with all the art 100% done. The game is ready to ship, so that I can minimize the time between the end of the Kickstarter and the delivery of the product. Because like, it's the worst when you back a project and you don't really follow the details that much, and then you get an update 6 months later, and it's like, yeah, we're just putting the finishing touches on the design, and you're like, dude, like, why did you need my money? Like, why did you run a Kickstarter if you weren't ready to go? And some games don't take a long time. Like Bullfrogs did not take a long time to design. Like maybe 6 months in terms of like get the design. I think before I hit Kickstarter, I had 3 illustrations done. The cover, I had one big illustration that I cut into 10 cards, which was like a super is a pro tip. If you want to save some money and just have the illustrator create one image and then cut it into a bunch of cards, and so you don't have to get it done 10 different cards. I think I just had those 2 illustrations done for the Kickstarter. And then eventually, as one of the stretch goals, it was like we were going to have different decks for each of the players. So I ended up getting 3 more illustrations, one for the other 3 players, which actually is kind of fun because it's a little bit of a puzzle. Like people can put the cards together in their deck and they can create one big picture, which is kind of a side effect of trying to save money on illustrations. But anyway, so I didn't have a lot of, small projects cannot take that long, but something that like Role Player Adventures has 420,000 words in it. That you can't do in 6 months, right? So, and I think some of it comes back from my production background, but you do a vertical slice, you say, this is, we set up a plan of like, this is what I think we're going to want to accomplish in terms of story. And then we say, okay, let's pick one of the adventures and take it as far as we can and see how long that takes us. And then you kind of use that information to extrapolate how long it's going to take to finish the project. And even now, so the Kickstarter for Role Player Adventures, and it was ready to go art-wise. And it's been a year since the Kickstarter, and it still hasn't been delivered yet. And it's not because, there's nothing, I'm not sitting on my hands over here is basically what I'm saying. But that's just the complexity of the project in terms of components. If you have a box with a deck of cards in it and a couple of bits, that's not a hard game to get done in terms of just even at the manufacturing level. But if you have, books and you've got plastic trays and you've got lots of dice that have custom shapes and all the stuff, like everything that's non-standard is likely to delay you somewhere along the pipeline, so.
Right. Well, I always, and I will bring this up with Role Player Adventures. I think it's just worth noting. One of the neat things I found with that, because I remember looking at the Kickstarter was, again, the interconnection. So again, thinking of a universe, you have pre-made characters, you could bring your character. So you're also, I think what's great with all of these projects with that even, cartographers, I will note actually within that particular space, that's not just a great game. The app is terrific.
Oh, I'm glad you
not everything gets a terrific app. So the universe itself is just really cool. It's great to see where it's gone and what you've done with it, and the fact that it continues to grow is just exciting as far as I'm concerned, because I think you've built a world that people love, and not let's face it, not everyone can say that because not everyone has done that. You could argue in recent years, Gloomhaven's a world a lot of people have come to love. You've got something like this, but not everyone's built, a Dungeons and Dragons or a Pathfinder or something like that. I think I've got a Pathfinder book behind me that I've used once in my life, to be quite honest.
The thing that's great is that like there's a ton of the world that I know about that nobody's really gotten a chance to play with yet. So like I'm excited to have people being exposed to these big chunks of world building that we've done and all these great characters that we've kind of invented that nobody even really knows yet. So I'm excited about that. And the way I think about it is, the world is like a blank canvas, and it's like we fill in the sections as we need them, right? So like, we have a new game and we figure like, well, how does this fit into the world? And it's like, oh, we haven't really talked about much about how the Minotaurs came to be and what their culture's like and how the relationship with the other different areas of the continent and stuff. So like, it's like, okay, we'll do a Minotaur. We're working on this Minotaur game, and now we got to fill in this part. And so much so that there's we started working. There was so many details being added by so many people because obviously I have my hands in all these things, but I also, James Ryan and Peter Ryan were the main writers of Role Player Adventures. They're contributing, and there's other writers that were contributing other stuff. And it's like all the detail. There's just tons of details. So we started like building an internal wiki site so that like we could kind of consolidate all the information about certain things so that we could reference our own things, because you write 420 words, you don't like remember everything you wrote at some point, So that's been super helpful. And like once Role Player Adventures releases, that will be available to like the general public too, so they can go in and dig around in there and find out some details about Commander Zalek or what other character they might be interested in.
Well, I found it interesting that you mentioned Mice and Mystics earlier because I think of that game a lot of times from a storytelling perspective. It's sitting on a shelf over there, actually waiting to be played with my son as he's more of an old enough now, but like I just, you want to do that all and prepare to do it. So that storytelling is big now, and it doesn't need, I think the neat thing there is that it doesn't need to be legacy, which your kind of stuff proves. It doesn't need something where you're ripping up cards. The storytelling can exist in other ways.
True.
You tell great stories, and one story I would love to hear, in particular, which I think is important, is for those people who are looking at the industry, who are looking at designing game. I mean, look, 6 months still not a short amount of time. It's the point is nothing's built in. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So, what's the advice you give to those who are interested? One thing I took away that I would point out is you talk a lot about listening. Talk about listening, playing games, but what other kind of advice comes to mind when you talk to those who are looking to be in this industry and potentially being there as a designer and creating games with either their own publisher or coming to someone like you to say, I've got this great game,
right?
Do something with it.
So, I mean, and I mentioned before, playing a ton of games is super helpful. Being aware of what people like, being aware of what you like, figuring out why you don't like the things you don't like. So there's all this kind of self-reflection, and then just playing a ton of stuff and just immersing yourself into the hobby. And then you decide to jump off and say, this doesn't seem so hard. I could do this, or you just want to get into game design a little bit. And the advice, and this is common advice, but I definitely believe it. It's like, come up with an idea. I mean, that seems a little silly to say, but like at the end of the day, like ideas are relatively cheap, right? There's like everybody in the world seems to have a great idea, it's but there definitely are some ideas that are better than others. But like the key is to get it to the table as fast as you can, and put your pride aside and just be aware, like, hey, we're going to do this thing and it's going to be awful, but we've got to do it. And there's a couple different techniques of designing games. Often people sometimes talk about like theme versus mechanics first. A lot of theme means basically like, hey, I want to make a dungeon crawl, or I want to make a game about sharks with lasers, or I want to make a game about dinosaur soccer or something. And then so that kind of starts to form in your mind of like what the story of the game is, and then that kind of leads you down to different paths about like what mechanics might be helpful, et cetera, et cetera. To kind of realize that it's like, I want all of this dino soccer game should all be about penalty shots. So then you like got to figure out like how that would work, and whether it's a dexterity game or it's like a deck building game, and you've got all this kind of knowledge from playing all these games of things that you can lean on, because there's a lot of games that just kind of remix existing mechanics from other games with like a twist, and that's more than enough to make an interesting game for people.
I now want to play a dinosaur soccer game. Is what's clear to me.
We'll work on it. We'll work on it together after the show. I mean, the other way is to do mechanics first. Where like you're like, I really like deck building. I think this is an interesting idea. Where like if you twist the cards and you fling them at your friend, you get bonus points or whatever. So then you got to figure out like after you get a certain point, like, well, how do I decide what theme this game has? And I mean, you can do themeless games like in abstract, but in general, they don't tend to do as well on the market and they're not as engaging, I think, for people without a theme. Yeah. But like when I first started working on Bullfrogs, I just took some regular playing cards and I a stack of meeples, and I just like was putting meeples on cards, and I was like, I wonder what does a turn feel like? Well, maybe I'm putting these on these. Well, what makes this interesting? Well, maybe if we can only do it in the row or column. And then it's like, what happens when all these circles are filled? And it's like, well, I don't know. Let's like move some things around and see what happens. So Bullfrogs was like a mechanics first design, whereas in Role Player was like, I want to make a game about building fantasy characters. That was like a theme first, and then they kind of told me what the mechanics should be.
But what I take away from what you're saying is there's no right way.
Oh, for sure.
It really depends on you, the process. And I have to imagine some people have to get over the hump of just that early going when you don't have, because a lot of us get used to it. I think I've got literally sitting next to me like the pieces from Everdell.
Sure.
Like you don't have nice chunky, wood pieces that your meeples can ride
No.
on sit next to you. So you've got to kind of get over the visual or the actual pieces that you're using.
There are these great like plastic bins of just 1 centimeter multicolored cubes that I like. A bunch of designers I know would just buy these, and they you can use them for anything. So you can just get a bunch of index cards and a big tub of cubes, and you could design a million different games.
Well, look, you design a lot of things. I actually want to do something slightly different before I let you go, because you've obviously been in, we've talked about board games and video games. Did you have a favorite video game or a video game that comes to mind? Because you were in that industry long enough that I'm sure you've played more than a few.
So of all the games that I worked on, the one that I probably have the most affinity for was, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong. Suikoden 3 or Suikoden 3 is like Japanese RPG. The thing that's great about it is that you play the story from 3 different characters' perspectives, and you switch between the characters, and you can choose what order you want to kind of see the world from. So, and one of the characters you play is a duck, which is always fun too. So that was the one that like I really enjoyed working on. Yeah, I mean, I play much less video games now than I did back in the day, but I still love me a good video game for sure.
Oh yeah, I do as well. I think there's Xbox controllers sitting behind me as I speak.
Yeah.
On that, I do want to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming, talking about your experiences, your time in the industry, some of these great games that obviously you've been behind, and particularly, again, I have to say, just the world building, which I think is a very interesting topic, because I think worlds get built in a lot of different ways, and I think that sometimes they're born quite organically and naturally, and I just love how the role player world was born, starting with just a really basic concept of making a character, which I just think it's such a neat thing, yet it was unique. But we've all done it.
Right. It's such a familiar touch point for people. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I actually go, I play Betrayal at the House on the Hill sometimes, and I will take the character at the beginning of the game, and one of my rules is whoever we're playing with, say, okay, everyone, here's your character, what's your backstory?
Right.
And it adds this little extra piece to the game. And it's fascinating to me what happens when you add story to something. So I'm a big fan of story. Telling your story has been a lot of fun. Is there anything else or anyone else you want to kind of mention here on the show tonight? Because I know obviously you've got a lot going on. I know we mentioned Cape May, but there's always projects I know in the pipeline. So if there's anything you did want to bring up, want to make sure you have a chance to share.
The 2 big things are the expansion for Lockout Breakout is on Kickstarter. It's a short campaign, only a few weeks long. So go check that out. It's in the US, in the US, it's $19, so it's actually pretty affordable, plus shipping, of course. And Cape May pre-orders are available on ThunderworksGames.com. And there's more videos coming in terms of explaining the gameplay a little bit more. Both Lockup Breakout and Cape May are both on Tabletopia to play for free, and on Tabletop Simulator. So if you're into playing digital versions of board games, you can go check them out, and they have the full rule books and all that jazz. Just keep an eye out. I've got games on the way, Role Player Adventures, which we talked about a lot about, Monster of a Box. It's going to be amazing. It has an expansion called Nephros's Judgment that's coming along with it. And then there's the new version of Cartographer's Heroes, and which also has 3 new map packs coming with it, which change up the gameplay and add some new scoring cards and all kinds of stuff too. So that is, and those are the Cape May, Role Player Adventures, and Cartographers are likely to be available in September, and then Breakout will come out early next year.
Yeah, and I'm on behalf of all the people excited about the Cartographers additional content. Can't wait. It's always good. Cartographers is so much fun. As a personal recommendation, I forget what video I did it, but we reviewed apps, and for those who did watch this, basically I'm pretty sure I said Cartographers is my favorite app in terms of That's iteration, awesome. With like Raiders of the North Sea being second. So
and
go check that app out. Yeah.
There's new content coming for the Cartographers app too. So you'll see an update there with some new stuff, some free, some not so free. But yeah, if you like the app and you want like even more stuff, we're gonna bring over a bunch of stuff from Heroes and that you'll be able to play on your phone too. So it's exciting.
Awesome. Cannot wait for that. Keith, again, thank you so much. For everyone who watches this, whether you watch this live or you're tuning in after the fact, I do want to make a note that on 5/27, tomorrow night, 5/27 at 9 p.m., Eric Slauson's going to be joining Creators Corner. We got a
Awesome.
double dip this week. Eric was previously on the channel as we talked about colorblind accessibility, really critical topic. Eric's going to be here. We're just going to get to talk with Eric, get to know Eric a little bit more, probably talk a little bit about Monstrosity, fun game that he has gotten to my table a few times now since that episode aired about colorblind accessibility. So tune in tomorrow. And then we've got some more great things coming to Creators Corner, as well as some things around a really exciting topic that came up on Twitter, which for me, it's exciting at least, which is board games and your local libraries. So please stay tuned for that. Putting together some a really interesting conversation to maybe help you get involved with your local library or get some ideas on how maybe you can help your local library get some board games and introduce this hobby to so many people in your community.
It's a real thing for sure. Like I was just at my local game store last week, and somebody was actually happened to be buying Role Player, and I was standing right next to him, and the person at the register is like, that guy designed that game. And I was like, that's true. I hope you enjoy the game. And they're like, oh, we played at the library a bunch of times. We like it so much. We want our own copy. So like there's great games and libraries get played. That's for sure. And expand the hobby. And there's lots of good that comes out of that for sure.
Yeah, so that's gonna be I got a really exciting guest that I'm just finalizing for that. So that's gonna be a ton of fun. Keith, thank you again. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Of course, as always, this has been Creators Corner. Thank you for taking time to go with me behind the meeple to meet the people, and we will see you all very soon on the next episode, which is, like I said, tomorrow. We'll talk to you then, everybody.
Thanks.